A relationship is like a dance. It takes two to tango. Want to have healthy and successful relationships filled with passion, fun, and harmony? Hi, and welcome to the Two to Tango Show with Linda Sutton, a podcast that explores how we can improve your relationships with God, yourself, your intimate partners, and the community. Tune in and learn actionable insights and tips you can use to improve your relationships. The battle of the sexes ends here. Join Linda Sutton today and take your relationships to a whole new level while having fun every step of the way.
Welcome to the Two to Tango Show, where our role and our goal is to help you with all of your relationships, from your relationship with God and self, intimate partner and family, community, nature, and nations. Hi, I am your host and usually doing the most, Linda Sutton, and today we're going to be talking about adornments, putting icing on cornbread. It's like, what is she talking about? Icing on cornbread? Like, what does she mean? Well, let's just get into it. Today I'm actually feeling rather nostalgic, and I was going to do another episode before this one, but I was just, as I started to think about and prepare mentally for this one, the nostalgia was so immense that I just said, I'm going to do this episode first. And I'm going to start this episode with something that I'm going to end with. And I want to talk to you about kind of a very famous milonga in Buenos Aires, and that is La Viruta. So that I'm feeling rather nostalgic about that. So just taking you on this journey with me, when I first started doing tango and I was going back and forth and traveling a fair amount back and forth to Buenos Aires in order to train and study the dance of tango. Buenos Aires is the capital of Argentina and is considered one of the capitals of Argentine tango in the world. And so I would travel back and forth to spend several weeks at a time to several months training in the dance, studying, and just getting to dance socially for hours upon hours at a time. And so, of course, when I was first coming up through the ranks, there were milongas, which is a tango dance. There are different spots that were really well known for a variety of reasons. And when I was coming up through the ranks, all roads led to La Viruta. So La Viruta was one of the milongas. It was one of the locations that was a milonga was held. And why, we would say all roads led to La Viruta is because, just to kind of give you a sense of what an evening of dancing tango would be like, is actually having dinner there is something that happens usually later. So merienda, which is kind of like your tea time, would be served either in your home or in a restaurant between 4 and 8 p.m. It would remind you kind of like continental breakfast for a / tea time. And so merienda is usually around that time. And so as a result, dinner usually starts later in Buenos Aires or as a part of this culture. So if you're going to go out for dinner, dinner is not usually going to start till 8 or 9 and go till about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. In fact, I remember a number of times where we would go out for dinner and we would go a little bit early. So we would arrive at 8 and then we would have lots of appetizers because the chef wouldn't even be there at 8. It's like, okay, well, you're not going to get dinner till 9 o'clock because the chef ain't even here. So dinner, if you were going out for dinner or even at home, it would be from, let's say, 8 or 9 to 10 or 11. And usually milongas, the dance parties, would start around 10 or 11 o'clock. Now, when people would go to the milongas, a lot of people would go to the milongas, if not by cab, by using public transportation. That would be the bus or the trains. The trains were very common during that time, very prolific, very efficient train system when I first started coming up through the ranks. And so the train system usually stopped running around midnight. And so what you would see is that everyone, after they left dinner, they would go to their milonga or milongas of choice. And then the trains would stop running. And so then the dancers would stay out and go to the milongas, and then after the milongas, go to the cafeterias for a coffee or tea, cafe or té, until the train started running back up again, which is usually around sunrise. And depending on the line, it would be either 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock is when the trains would start running again. And so the dancers would stay out until the trains started running again, and then they would go home for the evening. So this was like a typical night of dance in Buenos Aires. Now, for those who were definitely going to be staying out all night, some of the earlier milongas would start and stop, say around 2 or 3 o'clock. And so La Viruta was one of those milongas that was usually the one that was open the latest. So it was definitely milonga that was going to be going on until 5 or 5:30 at night. All the top dancers would converge on it. So whatever milonga you were at, if you're going to be out all night dancing, you would definitely wind up at La Viruta at some point in the evening. Usually around, they would have their live orchestras or bands earlier in the evening, and then all of the best dancers would converge on La Viruta, usually around 2 or 3 o'clock after all the other milongas ended, and danced until the sunrise or till the train started again. And that was just, the nature of La Viruta. There's even a famous song done about La Viruta, both, uh, I believe, a classic song, and then an even more modern song called La Viruta. I believe Otros Aires did a song about La Viruta. So anyway, one of the other elements that made La Viruta, made me so nostalgic about La Viruta, is that not only would the best dancers, young dancers come out, but a lot of the legends would come. So we would call them the old heads of Argentine tango. That was not a sign of disrespect. That was just, what they would call them, like the old guard, the old heads, the legends. They actually had their tables set up, their reserved tables at the corners of this dance floor, very large dance floor at La Viruta. And in one particular corner is where always the old head, the old guard, the legends would sit every single night. And there is usually very, very lively, very, very boisterous, very, very animated group of dancers who've been, like I said, they were the legends either of music and dance, well known, who often gave a very loud and opinionated, running commentary about everything that was going on the dance floor. So at La Viruta, this old guard made it very clear what they thought of what was going on the dance floor. And as you would dance by them in Spanish, they were very vocal about what they were seeing. It was almost like, when you watch a ball game and you're watching things going back, you have the announcer or the commentators kind of giving a running description, reactions of what's going on the field. Similarly, you would see that at La Viruta. So the old guard definitely had much to say about everything that was going on the dance floor every night, and they were very vocal about it. And then, like I said, as you were dancing by them, you would hear their remarks, or if you were sitting near them, you would hear their remarks. On one particular time, when I was, like I said, early on, because I was one of the few women of color who was dancing down there, dancing professionally and coming and traveling there regularly, because I was a woman of color and I was traveling back and forth with a relative amount of frequency in the early stages of my dancing. They knew who I was, or they kind of recognized who I was. And so early on, they thought I was Brazilian. So they thought I was brasileira. And also because I had been training, when I first started dancing, the way that you could identify a woman's skill level was in her heel height. So unlike today, where it's just kind of fashionable, is more a heel height. When I first started training, you actually earned your heel height. So a gentleman could look at your heel height and know what your level of experience was as a dancer, whether you're a beginner dancer, intermediate dancer, or an advanced dancer. And so by looking at your shoes, whether the heel height was, whether or not they were open toe or not, he would use that information as clues on your skill level, and so that he would adjust his lead accordingly based on that information. So when I first started coming out dancing, I had been training a while, and so I stepped onto the floor of La Veruta with 3.5 inch heels, which is 3.5 to 4 inch heels is considered advanced and pro level. Open toe shoes, in the dance of tango, to dance with open toe shoes means you have an extraordinary level of confidence in your technique as a follower, because that means that you understand that if your toes get stepped on, if your foot gets stepped on, that you are aware of the consequences of that, and that you have such a level of confidence in your skill that you have no concerns about your toes getting stepped on. So when I first started doing that, on one particular night where they clearly noticed me on the floor, they saw my shoe height and my heel height, and they saw my open toes. And so one of them remarked in Spanish, like, Brasileira, doesn't Brasileira know that this is not samba, that this is not samba, but that this is tango, was the remark that one of the ladies, I believe, was making as I was coming, my partner was bringing me onto the floor to dance. And then another one of the gentlemen, who was one of the legends of tape, he was like, no, 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 no. La Negra is not Brasileira, and she can dance. She can really dance. Just watch. Because he had seen me apparently at another milonga. And so it was so beautiful because, of course, everyone heard this exchange. We heard this exchange. I heard this exchange. And then when they saw us begin to dance, they realized that I was more proficient at dancing tango than they realized that I was not a samba dancer, that I was a tango dancer. And the reason that I was wearing open toe, very high heel shoes is because I had a great level of confidence in my skill level as a dancer, and I demonstrated on the floor. And so, kind of the moral to that story is if you can impress the masters, then you really have done something. And so that is kind of what I want to leave this episode out with, is kind of, number one, just the nostalgia of what it's like to be out at a night of dancing in Buenos Aires. And, a lot of things have changed. And obviously right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. So definitely it's going to be interesting to see how things are in the future. But then coming up through the ranks, there was so much unspoken communication that's going on. Of course, this is a very vocal and verbal, exchange that the elders and the old guard is having about what they're observing. But so much of the culture of tango is an unspoken conversation, unspoken rules, expectation, etiquette. And so I want you to kind of have that in the back of your mind as we talk about adornments. And adornments, or adornos, are what are we referred to when we're talking about a woman's dance. It also can refer to, elements that we're talking about when it comes to a man's dance. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to primarily focus on a woman's dance as it relates to adornments or adornos, because you more hear that phrase used as it relates to a woman's dance than a man's dance. And what is adornments or adornos? Adornments are usually the styling elements of a woman's dance. They are her flourishes. They are where she expresses her personality. These are her signatures. It's the things that make her dance uniquely her, uniquely feminine, uniquely the woman. You don't usually see the men doing these particular dance elements because they're usually reserved for moments in the dance where the woman has availability to express herself. Now, I will tell you, and the reason I call this putting icing on cornbread is because one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm usually a pretty easygoing person when it comes to tango because I want to bring harmony and synergy. But one of my biggest pet peeves in the dance and in the training world of Argentine tango is when women's technique training and women's styling training are used interchangeably. So women's technique and women's styling, those two different types of training, people use them interchangeably. And so they are training women in women's styling and adornments as if that is women's technique. If any woman that has ever trained with me, any young lady, any lady that has ever trained with me will learn very quickly from me that women's technique and women's styling are two completely, totally different things in the dance. And there's nothing that drives me crazy as when women misunderstand the distinctions between those two things and it shows up in her dance on the dance floor. Oh, it drives me crazy. Unfortunately, especially now in the season that we're in, I'm seeing more and more women's technique classes where the drills that women are being given are actually styling and adornment drills, not technique classes. Okay. So first and foremost, if you're going to train with me and you want to become a proficient dancer and a proficient follower early on, is to understand that women's technique is essential and is the fundamental foundation for your styling. Your technique must be developed before you develop your styling because your styling depends on you executing well your dance. Your technique, you must execute your following, execute the energy that's coming through the lead in your following first before you decorate it. I'll call it putting icing on cornbread because it's kind of like baking cornbread versus cake. If your intention was to create a cake and you made a cornbread, then there was a miscalculation somewhere. Equally, have you ever had like I love grandma's lemon pound cake, and I love pound cake. And one of the things I love about pound cake is a comfort food and is absolutely delicious when it's made when it is homemade and it's just like finger looking good. But one of the characteristics I really like about pound cake is that when a pound cake is really, really delicious and it's just good, it only requires a small amount of icing or glaze on it because the cake itself is so delicious and so good. It stands on its own. It doesn't require a lot of icing. It doesn't require a lot of glaze in order to be delicious. It's delicious on its own, so it only requires a little bit on of it to accent the deliciousness that is the cake itself. However, if you were trying to make cake and you came up with cornbread, no amount of icing and sprinkles that you put on cornbread is going to make it cake. Cornbread is cornbread. I don't care how much icing you put on cornbread, it is not going to make it cake. I don't care how many sprinkles. You can pile it as high as you want. Miles high of icing will not make it cake and will not make it delicious like cake. And so I likened adornments, and when I'm training ladies, I say your adornments, having adornments with poor technique is like trying to put icing on cornbread. You're trying to decorate it. You're trying to make it look good to attempt to make it taste good. But if it's not good, it's not good. If your technique is not good, no amount of styling is going to make your dance a better dance. Your dance has to be a good dance in and of itself. And then the adornments and the flourishes that you add to your dance just accent it and make it better and make it more pleasurable. But if your dance is not pleasurable, no amount of styling is going to make that dance pleasurable and the experience of it pleasurable. So technique is not about adornments. Technique is not about how to style your dance, but rather it's about how to be the best follower you can be. And the key to tango is about being an excellent leader and an excellent follower. And when those two things come together, it creates an extraordinary, magical dance in partnership. The partnership is what makes the dance so glorious. The synergy that makes up the partner, the synergy when the two comes together is what makes the tango so magical, not the styling of it. The synergy of it is what is the magical part of the tango. So your goal in terms of being the best follower and being the best at being in partnership with your partner is about how to be the most in sync, how to be the most accurate follower, how to be the most responsive follower, how to cultivate being a part of the conversation and the dialogue that you are having with your leader, not the kind of styling and flourishes that you can add to your steps that may have nothing to do with the conversation of his lead. So adornments, so that you understand them from an advanced standpoint. Adornments should be a natural part of the conversation that you are having with the leader. Adornments are not an unrelated outburst. And so this is why I caution ladies about training and doing drills on their styling and adornments, because your adornments should be a natural outgrowth of the lead that is already occurring, not against it. So if you create habits of doing adornments that are unrelated to the dynamic of the lead, then you are more likely to execute adornments at inappropriate places in the dance. So I don't know if anyone who's listening might remember this, but I remember, I believe it was old episodes of In Living Color with the Wayans brothers. I believe that's what it is. And in one of it, they had a skit where one of the gentlemen would just scream out random phrases, like my toe hurt. Like he would just you'd be talking to him or whatever, having interaction with him, and he would just scream out some random, unrelated, obscure phrase. And so it was just hilarious because the things that he would say would just be like so obscure, and it made it hilarious. Well, doing adornments without an understanding of technique and without having a good technique is kind of like those outbursts where, you could be talking about, hey, what was going on with your day at work today? And, somebody just scream out, pasta is naked. Like, you're like, what? What does that have anything to do with the flow of the conversation that's going on? Like this just random, obscure outbursts. And a lot of times when women are doing adornments and styling without having great technique, the experience of it to the leader as well as to those who are observing is like just this outburst that just came out of nowhere and is completely unrelated to what's going on the floor. So like I said, I tell my ladies that trying to do styling without mastering your technique is like trying to put icing on cornbread when you were trying to make a cake. Like that's the reality of it. So the next thing is to understand is that what causes women to want to put their styling before their technique. And it actually happens with gentlemen as well. And that is usually because most people that are introduced to the dance usually see the dance more often than not in terms of a movie or a show. So what they are exposed to is that they're exposed to stage or performance tango and are going to learn social tango. And social tango is actually very different from stage tango. Stage tango is done for performance, it's done for a crowd, and it's usually just a couple by themselves on a stage, maybe with an orchestra. And so all the rules of the navigation, the rules of the road, etiquette that comes with the dance, it goes out the window. Usually the dance is highly, highly choreographed, highly practiced, and often includes figures that are not possible to lead naturally. So they may be a practiced or stage sequence, whereas in social dance, it's about leading and following. And so because the man is leading steps in an environment that is constantly changing, everything he leads has to be led because he may have to change things on a dime that result in creating something different on the fly. He's got to be able to respond very quickly and maybe recreate a figure, midstream because of a change on the dance floor. And so in social dancing or performance tango, all of that is removed. So a man can choreograph a figure or idea that he would never be able to naturally lead on a dance floor. Well, when dancers are exposed to that, men and women, their expectation is for the wow factor. Their expectation is that the dance or tango is about the showy steps, the flashy steps, the big aha fancy things that you do on the dance floor that you see on the stage. However, socially has nothing to do with performing for an audience. Socially is about having a conversation with your partner, the person who's asked you to dance, and also to not only enjoy your partner, but respect the other dancers who are also on the floor and making sure that everyone stays safe. So it's a very different set of dynamics. It has to be natural. It has to be spontaneous, completely spontaneous, complete improvisation, because the dance floor is constantly changing on a dime. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what the people around you are going to do next. You can't necessarily read all of their minds at the same time. And so therefore you have got to be flexible and be able to lead fluidly. And so therefore you have to be able to follow fluidly. So why I bring that up is because a lot of ladies who are excited about the flashy styling moves are so eager to do the fancy steps and use them that they just insert them anywhere. And the key thing is that oftentimes when they do that, they are doing them against the flow and energy of the dance or lead. Adornments should never go against the flow and the energy of the dance or the lead, because it could compromise the safety of the couple, like including themselves, or the safety of other couples. So the gentleman has set energy in motion. So everything that she's doing is because his expectation is that she's following him. And so she's going to be in the flow of the energy that he sent. However, if she interjects an idea that is against the flow of that, or outside of the dynamic of that, she could put herself and him in a precarious situation against the flow of the dynamic, which is going to pull him out of his lead. And since he's responsible for the safety of the couple, by doing that, she could put them in harm's way. So, gentlemen are often managing that idea of giving her the space to express herself, but also being responsible for keeping them safe. And so as a lady, understanding that your technique is the most important and that your styling is secondary, you can support the gentleman in his role as a leader. So adornments like intimacy are not for the audience. It's not for those who are watching. Adornments like intimacy is for your partner. So they're a part of the moments that you share within the embrace that's between the two of you. And yes, some of them can be seen, but they're a part of you responding to what he is saying, not responding to something that you want to do on the dance floor. And so there's a subtlety, there's a flirtation, there's a sensuality in that conversation when you bring your feminine creativity to it that is in response to what he's saying and is a part of the flow and encourages him to respond as well. So it's kind of like a conversation. He says something to you, he asks you what you think, you respond, and you ask for his contribution, and this flow just co-creates together. So really, more than focusing on adornments in terms of styling, really the goal in terms of your adornments is about how to work on listening very deeply to your partner, learning how to restate what you heard and doing that in your figures, working on your core skills such as your balance, your alignment, maintaining the connection, holding your frame, holding your posture, completing each step as it's led step by step. These are the technique elements that you need to have in place. And then as you execute them well and more precisely and more completely, adornments actually come out naturally from excellent technique. Now, it really is an advanced understanding of the dance. And as you become more and more proficient, as you approach an advanced and professional level, you will realize that adornments actually come out naturally the more masterfully you follow your partner. What does that mean? So when I'm dancing as a professional dancer of tango, when people see me, they actually think I'm doing a lot of styling. They're like, your styling is so beautiful, Linda. Like, I want to be able to style like you. And so a lot of ladies try to imitate some of my styling. Now, my styling is my own signature. It plays on what my strengths are as a dancer. It plays on my experiences as a dancer of other different dance forms. It plays on the fact that I've got, as the old guard used to say, I've got legs that come out of my armpits. So I have really exceptionally long legs. And so my styling and my adornments, if you will, are a reflection of those elements that make up me. I never try to imitate another woman's adornments and styling. They're ideas that I like to see, but I really don't try to imitate or train in adornments. I try to train in my technique as it relates to my figures, but never really adornments. Why? Because to an untrained eye, it looks like I am doing styling. To an untrained eye, it looks like I am doing adornments in my dance. However, to a trained eye or master, they can see and understand that I am constantly managing the energy of the lead that is being given to me, the amount of force, the amount of power, the amount of dynamic that my leader is giving to me. And I'm constantly taking that energy that he's transferred to me, and I am translating it into the figures. And sometimes I may need to redirect it. Sometimes I may need to dissipate it. So for example, because I'm usually wearing very high heels, if I'm dancing with a gentleman that I've never danced with before, he may not understand that he is giving me more force than is needed to move me. And so therefore I may be at greater risk because he may not realize that giving me too much force with wearing heels that are as high as they are could turn my ankle over, for example, or he could be giving me too much force that could throw me off my balance. Well, if he's giving me a lot of extra force and maybe still learning to calibrate it, let's say when in the first couple of dances that we're dancing, in the meantime, I'm managing, absorbing all of that extra energy and determining how to translate it so that I can dissipate some of it to keep us both safe. So that's a dynamic that I'm always managing my balance, managing my access, managing the dynamic and energy that he's giving me. Say he may have led, for example, he may have led a baleo in the floor. And a baleo is a place where the leg flies and the heel comes off the ground. And if he's leading with a lot of energy, then that could mean that my heel could come very high up off the ground, which actually could be a danger to the other dancers around it. And so I may take that energy, still follow it, but I may redirect it or dissipate it or ground it in a way that keeps my leg from flying and keeps the women around me safe, as he's once again learning to modulate my following. And so, it's not that I'm not following him, it's that we were both unconscious of it, and he may have given me more force than I realized. And so in order to keep my balance, I have to absorb it in a different way. And the way that I translate that looks as if it's an adornment, because I'm going to take all of the energy, I'm going to fully express it. I'm just going to redirect it maybe upwards or redirect it downwards in a way that keeps it still within the flow of the energy, but takes into account the other elements of the dance. And so it may appear that I'm styling, when actually all I'm doing is I'm really following my leader at an extremely precise level where all of the energy is coming through to me. And so I'm managing that lead. I'm managing the space. I am translating it through my body in a way that is beautiful, is graceful, and is safe because I am usually one of the more experienced dancers. And so I have a different skill level as it relates to following, but also leading in my following because I have experienced that and perhaps my leader may not have in terms of the safety dynamics, for example. So I just wanted to share that with you because to a trained eye, they can see that that's what's going on. Sure, I do some styling. Sure, I'm extremely creative in my dance, but more of that styling than they realize is actually the management of my dance, is the management of the energy that is given to me and the management of it in the most beautiful, creative, artful way that I can express through my body. So I just wanted to say that and share that with you. Once again, as I said, men and women, do adornments to show off to their other friends what they can do. But the skill and the art of being a great follower is to develop outstanding technique. And if you develop outstanding technique, you will find that your adornments will be otherworldly, if you will, because they will be unique, they will fit, it will make perfect sense into the dance, and it will elevate what will already be an exquisite dance that you and your partner will experience, and those who are around you and watching will also experience. So like I said at the top of the show, it's really, really easy to impress someone who has no idea what you're doing. It's really easy to impress someone who doesn't know any better. And so it's really easy to get seduced by the allure of doing adornments and doing a lot of great styling and showing off to those around you, because for a beginner dancer who's seen you do all these flourishes and all these fancy moves, they might go, oh my gosh, this person must be amazing. But to a trained dancer, to a trained professional, many of them are cringing on the dance floor. And it's like, oh my God, will they please stop doing that? They're looking crazy and they're about to hurt themselves and hurt others on the dance floor. And so I leave you with this thought again that I gave you at the top, is if you can impress the masters, then you really have to done something. So I want to encourage my ladies and gentlemen, but my ladies, to really focus on your technique, true technique, not styling, not adornments, so that you too, when you step on the dance floor of your La Veruta, you will impress the legends and the beginners alike. But more importantly, you will have and share an exquisite experience with your dance partner. Okay, in today's episode, we have been talking about putting icing on cornbread here on the Tutu Tango Show, adornments and the difference between women's technique and women's styling in tango. And as we say here on the Tutu Tango Show, it not only takes two to tango, it takes you to tango. Ciao.
We have just concluded another moving episode of the Two to Tango Show with Linda Sutton. Did you enjoy the show? If so, head over to thetwototangoshow.com and discover a whole array of resources to help you spice up your relationship in every way. That's tangoshow.com. We would also like to hear from you, so don't forget to leave a review or feedback. Join us again next week for another entertaining and fun episode. Until then.